Tommy Chen sat alone at the back corner of the classroom, hunched over his notebook like he was trying to disappear into it. His black hair fell across his forehead, nearly covering his eyes. He liked it that way. If he couldn't see them, maybe they couldn't see him either. But that never worked. It never did. The bell rang for lunch and Tommy's stomach twisted into a knot. This was the worst part of every day. He gathered his books slowly, waiting for most of the other students to leave first. Maybe today would be different. Maybe they'd leave him alone. He was wrong. "Hey, Tommy," a voice called out from across the hallway. It was Derek Patterson and his friends. Tommy's heart sank. Derek was the type of kid who seemed to have everything. He was captain of the basketball team, got good grades without trying, and somehow everyone wanted to be around him. Everyone except Tommy. Tommy kept walking, pretending he didn't hear anything. His grandmother had taught him that ignoring bullies was the best way to handle them. But his grandmother had never met Derek Patterson. "I'm talking to you," Derek said, stepping in front of Tommy and blocking his path. 3 other boys flanked him on either side. They all wore expensive sneakers and designer jackets. Tommy looked down at his own shoes, the ones his grandmother had bought at the discount store 3 months ago. They were already falling apart. "I need to get to lunch," Tommy said quietly, trying to step around them. "What's the rush? Your grandma pack you another sad sandwich?" Derek laughed, and his friends joined in. They always laughed. It didn't matter if the joke was funny or not. They laughed because Derek laughed. Tommy felt his face getting hot. He hated that feeling. The burning in his cheeks, the stinging behind his eyes. He wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. "Leave me alone," Tommy mumbled, pushing past them. "What was that? Speak up, Tommy, or are you gonna cry like you did last week?" Derek called after him. Tommy walked faster, his books clutched tight against his chest. Behind him, he could hear them laughing. Always laughing. The cafeteria was already crowded when Tommy arrived. He got his lunch tray and looked around for a place to sit. Most tables were full of groups of friends talking and laughing together. Tommy spotted an empty table near the windows and headed toward it. He'd been eating alone for 3 months now. Ever since his parents died in the car accident. That's when everything changed. Before the accident, Tommy had friends. Not a lot, but enough. He played soccer, went to birthday parties, did normal kid stuff. But after his mom and dad died, he moved in with his grandmother across town. New school, new kids, and somehow everyone seemed to know his story before he even introduced himself. "That's the kid whose parents died," they'd whisper. At first they were nice about it. Too nice. The kind of nice that made Tommy feel like a wounded animal everyone pitied. But pity didn't last long. Derek and his friends started noticing other things. The way Tommy's clothes didn't quite fit right. How his grandmother dropped him off in an old car that made weird noises. The fact that he never had money for the vending machines or school trips. Tommy sat down and unwrapped his sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly, again. His grandmother made the same thing every day because it was cheap and didn't go bad. Tommy didn't mind it really, but Derek somehow always noticed. Across the cafeteria, Tommy spotted another kid sitting alone. His name was Ryan Cooper, and he'd been watching the whole thing in the hallway. Ryan was different from the other kids. He was popular, but not in a mean way. He played soccer, made decent grades, and people generally liked being around him. But Ryan kept to himself more than you'd expect from someone like him. Ryan had noticed Tommy weeks ago. He'd seen the way Derek and his crew treated him. The name calling. The shoulder bumps in the hallway. The photos they'd take of Tommy when he wasn't looking and post in their group chat with cruel captions. Ryan had seen all of it, and every time he'd felt this uncomfortable tightness in his chest. But what was he supposed to do? Derek was his teammate. They'd known each other since elementary school. And if Ryan said something, he'd become a target too. That's how it worked. You either joined in, stayed quiet, or became the next victim. There was no in-between. Ryan looked down at his own lunch, suddenly not hungry. His mom had packed him his favorite turkey sandwich with extra cheese, chips, an apple, and cookies. He thought about Tommy's plain sandwich across the room. The rest of lunch passed quietly. Tommy ate quickly and pulled out a library book to read. He'd learned that looking busy made people less likely to bother him. The book was about a kid who discovered he had magic powers and went to a special school where he finally belonged. Tommy wished that could happen to him. Not the magic part, just the belonging part. When the bell rang, Tommy gathered his trash and stood up. As he walked past Derek's table, someone stuck out their foot. Tommy didn't see it in time. He went down hard, his books and papers scattering across the cafeteria floor. Laughter erupted from Derek's table. "Oops," Derek said with a smirk. "Didn't see you there." Tommy's face burned as he scrambled to pick up his things. Other students walked past, some looking uncomfortable but nobody stopping to help. This was just how things were now. Tommy was invisible unless someone wanted to make fun of him. Ryan watched the whole thing from his table. That tightness in his chest was back worse than before. He started to stand up, but then Derek caught his eye and grinned. Ryan sat back down. Not today. He wasn't ready. But as Tommy gathered the last of his papers and hurried out of the cafeteria, something settled in Ryan's mind. This couldn't keep going. Someone had to do something. The question was whether that someone would be him. 3 weeks had passed since the cafeteria incident, and things had only gotten worse for Tommy. Derek and his friends seemed to have made it their personal mission to make every single day miserable. They'd started a group chat where they posted screenshots of Tommy from school, editing them with cruel captions and sharing them with half the 8th grade. Tommy knew about it because someone had accidentally added him to the chat for about 30 seconds before removing him. But 30 seconds was enough to see everything. The comments, the laughing emojis, the way people he'd never even spoken to were joining in on the joke. He was the joke. His grandmother had noticed Tommy was quieter than usual. She'd ask him every evening how school was going, and Tommy would force a smile and say, "Fine." She was 72 years old and worked 2 part-time jobs to keep them afloat. Tommy couldn't add to her worries. She'd already lost her daughter. She didn't need to know her grandson was falling apart too. Ryan, meanwhile, was having trouble sleeping. Every night he'd lie awake thinking about what he'd witnessed. The tripping incident kept replaying in his mind. The way Tommy had scrambled to pick up his papers while people laughed. The look on his face. Ryan had never been on the receiving end of bullying, but he'd read enough and seen enough movies to know how it affected people. His older sister, Amy, had noticed something was off. One evening, while they were doing homework in the kitchen, she'd asked him directly, "What's going on with you? You've been weird lately." "Nothing," Ryan had said, not looking up from his math homework. "Ryan." He'd sighed and put down his pencil. "There's this kid at school. Derek and his friends have been treating him really badly." "Like really badly?" Amy had frowned. "What do you mean?" Ryan told her everything. The names, the tripping, the online harassment. When he finished, Amy was quiet for a moment. "So what are you going to do about it?" She'd asked. "What can I do? Derek's been my friend since we were kids, and if I say something, they'll turn on me too." Amy had looked at him with disappointment. "So you're just going to watch it happen? That's not the Ryan I know." Her words had stung because they were true. Ryan prided himself on being a good person. But what kind of good person stood by while someone else suffered? The next day at school, everything came to a head. It was lunchtime again. Tommy had gotten his tray and was walking toward his usual table when Derek intercepted him. But this time was different. Derek didn't just make a comment and walk away. He and his 3 friends surrounded Tommy completely, blocking him from all sides. "Hey Tommy, heard your grandma's car broke down yesterday," Derek said loudly, making sure nearby tables could hear. "That's embarrassing. My dad says he saw her pushing it down the street." Tommy's face went pale. His grandmother's car had broken down and she'd been devastated. They couldn't afford to fix it right away, and she had pushed it with Tommy's help to get it out of traffic. Someone must have seen them and told Derek. "That's none of your business," Tommy said quietly, his voice shaking. "What? I can't hear you." "Speak up." Derek cupped his ear dramatically. One of Derek's friends, a kid named Chris, reached out and grabbed Tommy's lunch tray. "Let's see what Grandma packed today." Another sad sandwich. Before Tommy could react, Chris tilted the tray. Tommy's food slid off and hit the cafeteria floor with a splat. Chocolate milk spread across the tiles. His sandwich broke apart. The apple rolled under a nearby table. The cafeteria had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. Some kids had their phones out recording. This was entertainment for them. Content for their social media. Something to laugh about later. Tommy stood frozen, staring at his ruined lunch on the floor. He felt that familiar burning behind his eyes. No, not here, not now. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. He bent down to start cleaning up, his hands shaking. "Aw, look at him. Gonna cry?" Derek taunted, leaning over him. "Does baby need his mommy?" Oh wait, that was the line. The one line that should never have been crossed. Bringing up Tommy's dead parents wasn't just mean. It was cruel in a way that made several nearby students gasp. Tommy's vision blurred with tears. He couldn't hold them back anymore. He was on his knees on the cafeteria floor, surrounded by his ruined lunch, crying in front of the entire 8th grade while Derek and his friends laughed. Ryan had been sitting at his usual table with some other soccer players. He'd watched the whole thing unfold like a car crash in slow motion. When Derek made the comment about Tommy's mom, something inside Ryan snapped. He didn't think. He just moved. Ryan stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He walked straight toward the group surrounding Tommy, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every instinct told him to turn around, to sit back down, to pretend he hadn't seen anything. But Amy's voice echoed in his head. "What are you going to do about it?" Ryan pushed through the circle and positioned himself between Derek and Tommy. The cafeteria somehow got even quieter. "Back off, Derek," Ryan said. His voice didn't sound like his own. It was steadier than he felt. Derek looked genuinely surprised. "What?" I said, "back off. Leave him alone." Derek's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "Are you serious right now? You're defending this loser?" "He's not a loser. You're being a jerk. Actually, you've been a jerk for months, and I should have said something a long time ago." The cafeteria was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. Ryan Cooper, popular soccer player and Derek's longtime friend, was standing up to him. In front of everyone. "Ryan, dude, what are you doing?" Chris asked, looking confused. "The right thing. Finally." Ryan turned around and helped Tommy to his feet. "Are you okay?" Tommy nodded, wiping his eyes, too shocked to speak. Derek's face had turned red. "You know what? Fine, you want to be friends with the freak? Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when everyone starts treating you the same way." "I'm not worried about it," Ryan said, though his stomach was churning. Derek looked at his friends. "Let's go. Ryan can hang out with losers if he wants." As Derek and his crew walked away, whispers erupted throughout the cafeteria. Phones were definitely recording now. By the end of the day, this would be all over social media. Ryan looked at Tommy. "Come sit with me. I'll share my lunch." Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you do that?" Ryan thought about it for a second. "Because it was wrong. And because I should have done it a long time ago." They walked to Ryan's table together. Some of the soccer players looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. Ryan split his lunch with Tommy, giving him half his sandwich, some chips, and a cookie. As they ate, Tommy kept glancing at Ryan like he couldn't believe this was really happening. For the first time in months, Tommy didn't feel completely alone. Someone had stood up for him. Someone had seen him as a person worth defending. Ryan didn't know it yet, but his decision would change everything. Not just for Tommy, but for the entire school. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to do the right thing. By the time the final bell rang that afternoon, the entire school knew what had happened in the cafeteria. Videos had been posted, shared, and commented on hundreds of times. But the narrative wasn't what Ryan had expected. Some people praised him. There were comments like, "Finally someone stood up to Derek, and this is what real courage looks like." But there were just as many negative ones. "Ryan's such a traitor," and "Imagine throwing away your friends for a random nobody." The school had split into camps practically overnight. Ryan's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His soccer teammates were texting him, confused, and asking what was going on. Some were supportive, others weren't. One message from his teammate Brad simply said, "Dude, what were you thinking?" When Ryan got home that afternoon, his sister was waiting for him at the kitchen table with a knowing smile. "So," Amy said, "I heard you did something interesting today." "How do you already know?" Ryan dropped his backpack. "My friend's little brother is in your grade. It's all over social media. You're kind of famous right now." Ryan slumped into a chair. "I don't feel famous. I feel like I just made everything worse." "Worse how?" "Derek and his friends are furious. Half the school thinks I'm a traitor, and now Tommy and I are both targets instead of just him." Amy reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "But you did the right thing. That matters more than being popular." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to go back there tomorrow." That evening, Ryan's phone rang. It was his mom. She worked late most nights as a nurse at the county hospital, but she'd heard about the incident from another parent who'd seen the videos. "Ryan, honey, are you okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. "I'm fine, Mom. I saw what you did today. I'm proud of you. That took real courage. Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. Some people don't think so. The people who matter do. Trust me on that. While Ryan was dealing with the aftermath at home, Tommy was having a very different evening. His grandmother had also heard about what happened, but from a different source. The school had called her. "Tommy, I got a call from the principal today," his grandmother said as they sat down for dinner. "She wants to meet with us tomorrow morning. She said something happened at lunch." Tommy's stomach dropped. "It's nothing, Grandma. I'm fine. The principal said there was an incident. That another student stood up for you when some boys were being mean." Her eyes were watery behind her glasses. "Tommy, why didn't you tell me you were having problems?" "I didn't want you to worry. You already have so much to deal with." His grandmother set down her fork and took Tommy's hands. "You listen to me. You are the most important thing in my life. More important than bills, more important than work, more important than anything. If someone is hurting you, I need to know." Tommy felt tears coming again. It's been going on for a while. "These boys at school, they make fun of me. They say mean things about you, about Mom and Dad, about how we don't have money. Today they dumped my lunch on the floor and everyone laughed. But then this kid Ryan, he stood up for me. Nobody's ever done that before." His grandmother pulled him into a hug. "We're going to fix this. Tomorrow we talk to the principal and we make sure this stops." The next morning, Principal Helen Martinez sat in her office reviewing security footage from the cafeteria. She'd been principal at Riverside Middle School for 12 years, and she'd dealt with bullying cases before. But something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the videos circulating online. Maybe it was the way the entire student body seemed to be talking about it. Or maybe it was the fact that it had apparently been going on for months without any teacher noticing. There was a knock on her door. "Come in," she called. Tommy entered with his grandmother. They looked nervous. Principal Martinez smiled warmly and gestured to the chairs across from her desk. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Chen. Tommy, I want to talk to you about what happened yesterday." For the next 30 minutes, Tommy told her everything. The name-calling, the online harassment, the daily torment that had been his life for the past 3 months. His grandmother held his hand the whole time, tears streaming down her face as she heard what her grandson had been going through. Principal Martinez took detailed notes. "Tommy, I am so sorry you've been dealing with this. And I'm sorry that no one on our staff noticed and intervened sooner. That's a failure on our part." "It's not your fault," Tommy said quietly. "Actually, it is. It's my job to make sure every student here feels safe. You haven't felt safe, and that's unacceptable." She turned to her computer. "I've been reviewing security footage from the past few weeks. The cameras captured quite a bit. I'm going to need to speak with several students." After Tommy and his grandmother left, Principal Martinez spent the rest of the morning pulling video footage and social media evidence. What she found shocked her. The bullying was worse than she'd imagined. Derek and his friends had created multiple group chats dedicated to making fun of Tommy. They'd shared edited photos, crude jokes, and personal information about his family situation. Over 50 students had participated or viewed these chats without reporting anything. But it wasn't just Derek. As she dug deeper, Principal Martinez found evidence of other students being bullied too. Derek's group seemed to target anyone they deemed weak or different. Tommy had just been their most consistent victim. She called in teachers who had Derek and Tommy in their classes. None of them had noticed anything unusual. The bullying had been subtle enough to fly under the radar, happening in hallways between classes, at lunch, and online where teachers couldn't see. Principal Martinez also called in Ryan Cooper and his parents. When they arrived that afternoon, she explained what she'd learned. "Ryan, what you did yesterday was incredibly brave," she said. "But I need to understand the full picture. How long have you known this was happening to Tommy?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His parents sat on either side of him. "I've noticed it for a few weeks. Maybe a month. Why didn't you report it?" Ryan looked down. "I don't know. I guess I didn't think it was my place. And Derek's my friend, or he was. I didn't want to get him in trouble," his father spoke up. "But you did the right thing in the end." "That's what matters," Principal Martinez nodded. "You did? But this brings up a bigger issue. How many other students knew and didn't say anything?" Over the next 2 days, Principal Martinez conducted a thorough investigation. She interviewed dozens of students. She reviewed hundreds of social media messages. She discovered that Derek's behavior had been an open secret among the 8th grade. Most kids knew it was happening, Many found it entertaining. Very few thought to tell an adult. She also spoke with Derek and his friends individually. Derek was defiant at first, claiming Tommy was too sensitive and that they were just joking around. But when confronted with the evidence, the videos, the messages, the pattern of behavior over months, he went quiet. Derek's parents were called in. They were wealthy, influential people in the community. His father was a lawyer. His mother sat on the school board. They immediately went on the defensive, claiming their son was being unfairly targeted. Boys will be boys, Derek's father said. This is just normal middle school behavior. Principal Martinez pulled up the video of Derek dumping Tommy's lunch and making the comment about his dead mother. She played it without saying a word. The room went silent. Even Derek's parents couldn't defend that. This isn't normal behavior, Principal Martinez said firmly. This is systematic harassment. And it stops now. She also made a difficult discovery. The bullying hadn't gone unnoticed by all staff. One teacher had actually seen Derek push Tommy in the hallway weeks ago, but had written it off as roughhousing. Another had heard rumors about the online harassment but hadn't investigated. The school system had failed Tommy at multiple levels. By Friday afternoon, Principal Martinez had made her decision. But it wasn't just about punishing Derek. She realized this was a symptom of a much bigger problem. The school culture had allowed this to happen. Students felt comfortable being cruel because there were no consequences. Bystanders stayed silent because speaking up was social suicide. She needed to send a message. Not just to Derek and his friends, but to the entire school. And that message needed to be powerful enough to create real change. Principal Martinez scheduled an emergency assembly for Monday morning. Every student would attend, and what she had planned would make sure nobody forgot this moment. Monday morning arrived with unusual tension in the air. Word had spread about the mandatory assembly, and rumors were flying. Some students thought Derek was going to be expelled. Others whispered that the whole soccer team might be suspended. A few believed Ryan was in trouble for causing drama. Tommy had barely slept over the weekend. He'd spent most of it worrying about what would happen at school. Would things get worse? Would Derek's friends come after him harder? Would Ryan regret standing up for him? Ryan had similar worries. Several of his teammates had stopped responding to his texts. Derek had posted cryptic messages on social media about fake friends and traitors. The soccer team had a big game coming up, and Ryan wondered if he'd still be playing. At 8:30 in the morning, the entire student body filed into the auditorium. The 8th graders sat in the middle section. Tommy found a seat near the back, trying to make himself invisible like always. Ryan sat with what remained of his friend group, though the empty seats around him spoke volumes about who had chosen sides. Derek and his 3 friends, Chris, Brandon, and Tyler, sat together near the front. They looked defiant, like they were ready for whatever was coming. Principal Martinez walked onto the stage, and the whispers immediately died down. She looked different than usual, more serious, more determined. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying through the auditorium's sound system. "I've called this assembly because something happened at our school last week that we need to address. But before I get into that, I want to talk about what kind of community we want to be." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a simple question. "What does it mean to be a good person?" "I've been a principal for 12 years, she continued. "I've seen thousands of students come through these doors, and I've learned something important. The true measure of a person isn't their grades or their athletic ability, or how popular they are. It's how they treat others when no one's watching. It's whether they stand up when they see something wrong. It's whether they choose kindness over cruelty." Tommy shifted in his seat, wondering where this was going. Last week, one of our students, Tommy Chen, had his lunch knocked to the floor in the cafeteria. He was mocked, humiliated, and had cruel things said about his deceased parents. This happened in front of dozens of students. Many of you saw it. Some of you recorded it on your phones. The auditorium was completely silent now. "But here's what troubles me most," Principal Martinez said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "This wasn't an isolated incident. My investigation revealed that Tommy has been bullied systematically for 3 months. And it wasn't just happening to him. Several other students came forward with their own stories after Tommy found the courage to speak up." She paused, letting that sink in. "I reviewed security footage. I examined social media accounts. I interviewed students and teachers. What I found was disturbing. A group of students created multiple online chats dedicated to harassing their classmates. They shared edited photos, spread rumors, and encouraged others to join in the mockery. Over 50 students saw these messages and said nothing. Not to a teacher. Not to a parent. Not to me. Uncomfortable shuffling rippled through the crowd. Students looked at their laps, suddenly very interested in their shoes. The students directly responsible for bullying Tommy and others will face appropriate consequences. Derek Patterson, Chris Monroe, Brandon Lee, and Tyler Hughes will be suspended for 2 weeks. They'll be required to attend counseling and complete a program on empathy and the impact of bullying. Their return to school will be contingent on demonstrating real change in their behavior. Derek's face turned red. His friends looked shocked. From somewhere in the audience, someone whispered, "Finally." But Principal Martinez wasn't done. However, suspension is only part of the solution, because the real problem isn't just 4 boys who made bad choices. The real problem is a culture where bullying is tolerated, where being cruel is considered funny, where standing by and doing nothing is the norm. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo from the cafeteria incident, but it had been edited to blur faces, showing only the scene itself. This is the moment that changed things, because one student made a different choice. "Ryan Cooper, can you please come up here?" Ryan's heart nearly stopped. He hadn't been expecting this. Around him, students turned to stare. Slowly, his legs shaking, Ryan stood up and made his way to the stage. Principal Martinez smiled at him warmly. "Ryan, I know you're probably uncomfortable right now, but what you did last week was extraordinary. You saw injustice happening, and instead of looking away like dozens of other students, you stepped in. You put your reputation on the line, your friendships, your social status, and you did it because it was the right thing to do." Ryan's face was burning. He didn't feel extraordinary. He felt terrified. The word for what Ryan demonstrated is upstander. Principal Martinez explained to the audience. It means someone who stands up for others instead of standing by. Our school has needed upstanders for a long time. Today I want to recognize Ryan's courage with something new. She picked up a plaque from the podium. This is the first annual Upstander Award for Riverside Middle School. It will be given each year to a student who demonstrates the courage to stand up against injustice. Ryan, you're our first recipient. Ryan took the plaque with shaking hands. He didn't know what to say. "Thank you" seemed too small. "But we're not stopping there," Principal Martinez continued, addressing the full auditorium again. "Tommy, would you please join us on stage?" Tommy's eyes went wide. No, not him. He couldn't go up there. Everyone would stare. Everyone would see him. But his grandmother's words from that evening echoed in his mind. "You are the most important thing in my life." Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Tommy stood up and walked down the aisle. Each step felt like a mile. When he reached the stage, Principal Martinez put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Tommy has shown incredible strength over the past few months," she said. "He endured treatment that no student should ever face. And when given the chance to speak up, he told the truth, even though it was scary, even though he didn't know what would happen." She turned to face Tommy directly. "Your experience has opened our eyes to problems we need to fix. And I want you to be part of the solution. Starting next month, we're launching a new program called the Upstander Initiative. It will include peer mentoring, anti-bullying education, and support systems for students who are struggling. Tommy, I'd like you to serve as one of our first student mentors. If you're willing." Tommy's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Me?" "Yes, you. Because you understand what it feels like to need help. That makes you the perfect person to help others." Tommy nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Principal Martinez addressed the audience one final time. "I want every single person in this auditorium to think about who you want to be. Do you want to be someone who tears others down? Someone who stands by while others suffer? Or do you want to be someone who builds others up? Someone who stands up when it matters?" She paused. "I can't force you to be kind. I can't make you care about your classmates. But I can tell you this. The culture of this school is going to change starting today. Bullying will have consequences. Cruelty will not be tolerated. And upstanders will be celebrated. Some of you might think this is too dramatic, that we're making a big deal out of nothing. But I want you to consider something. Tommy could have been your brother. Your friend. You. How would you want people to treat someone you care about? How would you want to be treated if you were in his shoes?" The auditorium remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. thoughtful, uncomfortable, heavy with realization. "This assembly is dismissed," Principal Martinez said. "But before you leave, I want you to do one thing. Look around you. Really look at the people sitting near you. Every single person in this room is fighting battles you know nothing about. Every person deserves basic human dignity. Remember that." As students began to file out, something unexpected happened. A girl from the 10th grade stood up and started clapping. Then another student joined. Then another. Within seconds, half the auditorium was on their feet, applauding. Tommy stood on that stage, tears streaming down his face. But for the first time in months, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. The applause continued to build. Tommy stood frozen on the stage, overwhelmed by what was happening. Students he'd never spoken to were clapping for him. People who'd walked past him in hallways for months without acknowledging his existence were now on their feet. Ryan stood beside him, and without thinking, he put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. A simple gesture of solidarity that said, "I'm here. You're not alone." From her seat in the back of the auditorium, Tommy's grandmother was sobbing openly. She'd spent 3 months watching her grandson come home defeated every single day. She'd seen him retreat into himself, become a shell of the bright boy he used to be. And now, watching him stand on that stage with his head held high, she could barely breathe through the emotion. But not everyone was clapping. Derek sat with his arms crossed, face red with humiliation and anger. His friends looked shell-shocked. 2-week suspension, mandatory counseling. Everyone would know they were the bullies. The villains of the story. Chris leaned over and whispered, "This is so unfair. We're getting crucified while Ryan gets treated like some hero." "Shut up," Derek hissed back, because deep down beneath the anger and embarrassment, something else was stirring, something that felt uncomfortably like shame. As the assembly ended and students filed out, the atmosphere in the hallways was different. Conversations were quieter, more serious. Groups of friends huddled together, talking about what had just happened. Tommy tried to slip away to his locker, wanting to escape the attention, but students kept stopping him. Not to mock him this time, to apologize. A girl named Lily from his English class approached him, her eyes red. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. I saw what was happening to you and I didn't say anything. I should have done something." "It's okay," Tommy said quietly, though the words felt strange in his mouth. How many times had he wished anyone would speak up? "No, it's not okay," Lily insisted. "I was a coward, but that's going to change. I promise." Similar conversations were happening all over the school. Students who'd participated in the group chats were deleting messages, guilt eating at them. Kids who'd stayed silent were realizing their silence had made them complicit. The assembly had held up a mirror, and a lot of people didn't like what they saw. Ryan was dealing with his own flood of reactions. Some students congratulated him. Others were less kind. A guy from the soccer team shoulder checked him in the hallway and muttered, "Traitor." But then something unexpected happened. A kid named Kevin, who Ryan barely knew, stopped him between classes. "Hey Ryan, I just wanted to say thank you. Last year I was getting bullied pretty badly. Nobody stood up for me."
"I eventually switched schools because it got so bad."
"What you did for Tommy, I wish someone had done that for me." Ryan felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "Me too. But maybe things are different now." Kevin smiled slightly and walked away. By lunchtime, the cafeteria felt like foreign territory. The usual hierarchy of tables had been disrupted. Tommy sat with Ryan, and they were quickly joined by Lily and 3 other students who wanted to show their support. It wasn't a huge group, but it was more friends than Tommy had eaten with in months. Across the cafeteria, Derek and his friends sat alone at their usual table. Other students gave them a wide berth, like their behavior might be contagious. The social order had flipped overnight. "This is so messed up," Tyler muttered, pushing food around his tray. "We're being treated like criminals." "Because we acted like criminals," Brandon said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "What? You guys can't seriously think what we did was okay?" "We were just messing around," Chris protested, but even he sounded uncertain now. Derek said nothing. He kept replaying the assembly in his mind, the way Principal Martinez had described their behavior, the video of him dumping Tommy's lunch, that comment he'd made about Tommy's dead mother. He'd thought he was funny, clever, popular, but watching it played back, Hearing it described out loud, he'd seen it for what it really was: cruel, unnecessary, wrong. His father had been furious about the suspension. "We're going to fight this," he'd said. "They can't ruin your reputation over some overly sensitive kid who can't take a joke." But his mother had been different. She'd watched the video from the cafeteria, and when it ended, she'd looked at Derek with tears in her eyes. "Is this who you are?" she'd asked. "Is this the person I raised?" Derek hadn't known how to answer. Over the next few weeks, Riverside Middle School began to transform. Principal Martinez wasn't just paying lip service to change. She implemented real programs. The Upstander initiative launched with 20 student volunteers. They wore special badges and were trained to recognize signs of bullying and how to intervene safely. Tommy, true to his word, became one of the peer mentors. He'd meet with students who were going through similar struggles and share his story. It was terrifying at first being that vulnerable, but it was also healing. Ryan started an Upstander club that met every Wednesday after school. They discussed scenarios, practiced intervention techniques, and created awareness campaigns. Within a month, over 60 students had joined. The club made posters that went up all over school. "Silence helps the bully, not the victim. Your words have power. Use them wisely." Being kind is cooler than being cruel. Teachers received training on recognizing bullying and responding appropriately. The teacher who'd dismissed Derek pushing Tommy as roughhousing was particularly affected. She pulled Tommy aside one day and apologized directly, tears in her eyes. But perhaps the most surprising change came from Derek himself. 2 weeks into his suspension, Derek attended his mandatory counseling session. He'd gone in defensive, ready to just get through it. But the counselor, a patient man named Mr. Howard, didn't lecture him. Instead, he asked questions. "Why do you think you treated Tommy that way?" Derek had shrugged. "I don't know. Everyone thought it was funny. Did you think it was funny?" Derek had started to say yes, but the words stuck in his throat. Had he actually found it funny? Or had he just liked the power, the attention? The way people laughed at his jokes and followed his lead? "I wanted people to think I was cool," Derek admitted finally. "And do you think being cruel makes someone cool?" Derek looked at his hands. "No, I think it makes someone a bully." The sessions continued, and slowly, Derek began to understand the impact of his actions. Mr. Howard had him write letters from Tommy's perspective, imagining what it felt like to be targeted every single day. The exercise broke something open in Derek. He'd never considered what it felt like on the other side. When Derek returned to school after his suspension, he was different, quieter, more thoughtful. His old friends tried to fall back into their usual patterns, making jokes at other students' expense. But Derek didn't join in. One day, about a month after the assembly, Derek did something that shocked everyone. He approached Tommy at his locker. Tommy tensed up immediately, muscle memory from months of harassment. "I'm not here to bother you," Derek said quickly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, for real. What I did to you was wrong, and I don't have any excuse for it." Tommy stared at him, suspicious. "Okay, I know sorry doesn't fix anything. And I know you probably hate me. You should hate me. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. And if there's ever anything I can do to make up for even a tiny bit of what I put you through, I will." Before Tommy could respond, Derek walked away. Ryan had witnessed the exchange from down the hall. Later that day, he asked Tommy about it. "Do you think he meant it?" Tommy wondered aloud. "I don't know," Ryan admitted, "but at least he tried. That's more than nothing." By the time spring arrived, Riverside Middle School was almost unrecognizable from what it had been 6 months earlier. Bullying incidents had dropped significantly. The Upstander Club had grown to over 100 members. Students were looking out for each other in ways they never had before. Tommy's transformation was remarkable. He still had quiet days, still dealt with anxiety, still missed his parents terribly, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had real friends. He had a purpose. He'd turned his pain into something that helped others. Ryan learned that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Some of his old friendships never recovered, but the new ones he'd made, the ones built on actual values instead of social status, were deeper and more meaningful. Even Derek was changing, though it was a slower process. He'd never be best friends with Tommy, that bridge had been burned, but he stopped being cruel. He started calling out his friends when they made mean jokes. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was growth. One afternoon, Principal Martinez called Tommy, Ryan, and several other Upstander Initiative members into her office. When they arrived, they found representatives from the school board and the local news. "Your story has inspired other schools in the district," Principal Martinez explained. "They want to implement similar programs, and they'd like you to help share what you've learned." Over the next few months, Tommy and Ryan visited 5 different schools, sharing their story. Tommy talked about what it felt like to be bullied and why it was so hard to speak up. Ryan talked about overcoming the fear of social consequences to do what's right. At one school, after their presentation, a 6th-grade boy approached them. "I'm being bullied," he whispered, "and I didn't know what to do. But after hearing your story, I think I'm going to tell a teacher." Tommy knelt down to the boy's eye level. "That's really brave. And it's going to be okay, I promise." As they left that school, Ryan turned to Tommy. "You know what's crazy? A few months ago, you were the kid who couldn't speak up. Now you're helping other kids find their voice." Tommy smiled, a real, genuine smile. "And a few months ago, you were the kid who stayed silent. Now you're teaching people how to stand up." "We both changed," Ryan said. "No," Tommy corrected. "We both found who we really were." The ending of this story isn't that everything became perfect. Tommy still had hard days. Derek was still working on being a better person, and sometimes he failed. Ryan still worried about what people thought of him, but the culture had shifted. Students at Riverside Middle School learned that kindness wasn't weakness, that standing up for others was courageous, that your words and actions had real impact on real people. And sometimes, in the weeks and months that followed, Tommy would walk through the hallways and catch someone's eye. A student he'd helped through the Upstander Initiative. A kid who'd apologized for their silence. Ryan walking beside him, proof that true friendship could come from the most unexpected places. In those moments, Tommy would remember standing in that cafeteria with food on the floor around him, feeling completely alone. And then he'd remember Ryan stepping between him and his tormentors, choosing compassion over convenience. One person standing up had changed everything, not just for Tommy, but for an entire school. It proved that you don't have to be the strongest, the most popular, or the most powerful to make a difference. You just have to care enough to try.